This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, book 24, the second Sicha, the portion of Vayelech. We're going to take an in-depth look into what many would consider to be a too fundamental a question to even ask. It's too scary to ask. But the Rebbe is going to ask the question and going to give us an answer that's incredible in its simplicity. And I don't have to speak for the Rebbe. I'll let him speak for himself. I'll paraphrase the Sikha. One of the mitzvahs that the Jews were instructed in the end of the 40 years of their sojourn in the desert, and literally very close to the day of Moshe's passing away, is the injunction, the mitzvah, the commandment of writing a Sefer Torah. As the pasuk says in this week's portion, and now you shall write for yourself this song. You can't write one portion of the Torah in absence of the rest of the Torah. The Torah needs to be written as an entire book. So if we have a mitzvah to write this particular song, which many say goes on the portion of Ha'azinu, it's kind of a prophetic song about what will happen to the Jews if they listen, if they don't listen throughout the history. But the injunction, the mitzvah to write this song is actually translated into one of the 613 mitzvahs, which is the positive commandment, mitzvah taseh al kol ish v'ish. There's a positive commandment on every person, every Jewish person, lichtov sefer Torah latzmo, to write his own sefer Torah. Now, since this instruction was said by Moshe Rabbeinu as an introduction, as a preparation to going into the land of Israel, as the verse says, because I'm going to bring you to the land, and then this song that you will have written will be there to so to speak, answer to you, to call out to you. If you didn't listen to Hashem, the song, the Torah will remind you that things aren't going to be good if you don't listen. So we understand that if this is said as something that needs to be done before they go into Israel, that means that now at the end of 40 years, every Jew hears this mitzvah that they have to write the Torah. Everybody should immediately start writing Sefer Torahs. 600,000 men should take out pens and quills and parchments, writing a Sefer Torah. So the Rebbe says it's very difficult to understand. The instruction was given on the 7th of Adar, the day Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. We don't find anywhere that there's a description in the Torah of a mass Sefer Torah writing ceremony. And that would be a much bigger thing if there would be this mass Torah writing ceremony. This would be incredible. First, you need to have, how do you get all the parchments in one day? How would you prepare all the ink? How would you get all this stuff? Even if you say they only had to start writing the Sefer Torah, didn't finish it in one day, but even to start, you got to prepare stuff for writing. We don't find such a thing. It would have been talked about when we speak about the fact that the Jewish people encamped at Har Sinai like a one man with one heart. But this is even more than that. It's as if they started writing on a communal level, 600,000 of them Sefer Torahs. Besides the fact that the Jews were busy when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, that day that he told them to write Sefer Torah, they had something else on their mind. Their greatest leader, their most beloved leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, passed away. And we know that they were busy with mourning him. Only after 30 days of mourning came the 7th of Nisan. Only 3 days later, they passed over the Jordan. So there was no time, historically, the way we read the description, what happened, there was no time for them on the day of Moshe's passing to all start writing Sefer Torahs. It didn't happen. If it's not spoken about, it doesn't seem like it happened. And to point out that to write such Sefer Torah, just to understand the practical implication of it is in terms of parchment that you need. Don't forget, you can't just use parchment on any kind of animal. It has to come from a kosher animal. Interesting that the parchment doesn't have to be from an animal that was kosher for eating. In other words, the ox or the cow doesn't have to be shechted in a kosher way and be healthy with its lungs and all that to be actually kosher. But it has to be a kosher species. So you are limited to what kind of parchment you can use, and you would also need to have, as we said, ink. Also, you would need to know how to write. We see even today how many people really know how to write handwriting to write a Sefer Torah. It's the first time back then. It doesn't seem to, especially you want to write a nice Sefer Torah. There's a mitzvah when you do something, you should do it nice. Should have a nice ink, should have a nice handwriting. We try and get the nicer handwriting of the Sofer. So how could it have been that they all wrote? So we must say that if they did write, it would have had to be only through an emissary, through a designee, somebody who knows how to write. But we don't find that this took place en masse on the day that Moshe passed. And yet there's a clear instruction. Paragraph 2, that ever comes with a much bigger question. This was a question about 3,300 something years ago, what happened when they went out of when they were about to go into Israel. We don't find that they wrote. We were not there. We don't know. But we are living now. Everybody here has become bar mitzvah. Okay, maybe at the bar mitzvah you don't consider yourself such a big tzaddik, but we know there's big tzaddikim that have become bar mitzvah. So paragraph 2 that says we have a big question from our own lives. We know that, oh no, sorry, this is not the question from our lives. This is a question still about the history, sorry. We know that it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, a fascinating, beautiful part of the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life is that he comes and he says, here, tribe of Levi, here's the Sefer Torah. And what did the other 12 tribes say? Moshe Rabbeinu, that's not fair. You know what's going to happen? If you give your tribe, the tribe of Levi, the Sefer Torah, they're going to say it's theirs. And hey, it belongs to us just as much as to them. There's nobody who's in charge of Torah. It's not personal, some personal family kind of business. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote another 12 Torahs to give to each of the 12 tribes. So we know Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 12, he wrote 13 Torahs, 12 for the 12 tribes, including Levi. One he put in the Holy Ark. How could possibly Moshe Rabbeinu write 13 Sefer Torahs in one? How could he write 13 Sefer Torahs in one day? So there are commentaries that explain that it means that Moshe Rabbeinu only finished writing the Sefer Torahs because he kept writing as he was teaching, he kept writing. He had written down a bunch of Torahs. And the last day of his life, he finished the last few chapters, last few verses. You could do that. That's plausible. Interesting that there's a where should I put in this footnote 15? I'm just trying to think. You're asking that the Torah says you have to write this song, which is only Hazinu, but the Mefarshim, the Poskim, all the way from the very beginning, derive. You can't just write. Hashira Hazot means you have to write the whole book. That includes also the song of Hazinu. That's clear. There's no argument about that. Baruch No, the Torah says he wrote the Torah. He has to write the Torah.
Could it also mean this communication? Could it also to me? The Torah can always be interpreted on a range of levels.
So
like starting from a literal story.
I hear you. I hear you. Let's, if you don't mind, file the question. Okay. We'll come back to it because we'll come back to it. We're going to learn here. This is on a practical level. There is a fascinating footnote here, footnote 15, that the Chassam Sofer brings in the name of Shalah. To answer, how could he possibly, another question, how could he have written the Torah on Shabbos? According to most opinions, what day did he pass away? On the 7th of Adar, which was Shabbat. Shabbos, you can't write. So the Shalah, 500 years ago, Rabbi, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Rabbi Shayahu Alevi Horowitz, maybe 500 years ago, maybe 400 years ago, but pre-Baal Shem Tov, he says, and he was a Kabbalist, a mystic, he says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it through what's called Hashba'at HaKulmus. He forced the pen to write through some kind of a mystical angel or something. It wrote from itself. He didn't actually write because he couldn't write on Shabbos. This would also explain how he wrote 13 Sefer Torahs in one shot. Would anybody have a problem if I told you a laser printer printed 13 Sefer Torahs? Not a big deal. So what's the big deal that then they had some kind of a spiritual power that Moshe could enlist, like almost like a form of the occult, but in a positive way. Holy powers of angelic powers somehow that wrote the Torah, 13 Torahs. But the Rabbi says it's difficult to learn this in the simple narrative of the pasuk of the story, because that would mean to say that if we had somehow a miraculous Torah written today, we could use it. It doesn't seem the Torah needs to be done in the physical world. So the Rebbe says, I'll stay away from that answer. He's quoting it, but that there is a system of thought that does follow the answer. And by the way, this sicha will not deal with the fact, what do we do with it? How do we answer that he wrote it on Shabbos? There's many answers to that. There's a wide range of answers, but I'm going to stick here to what the Rebbe teaches in this sicha. I'll just give you a peek into one of the answers is that possibly because it was so important, so critical for the transmission of Torah for all future, that it pushed off Shabbos and it was able to be written on Shabbos. But that's only one opinion. The other opinions are maybe Moshe Rabbeinu actually finished it right before Shabbos. Other opinions is maybe Shabbos extended and really Shabbos was over when he finished Shabbos. Various different things. But we're not going to deal with the issue of how he did it Shabbos. We're going to stick to the question, how could he write 13 Torahs on one day? And a bigger question, why didn't the Jewish people there, we don't find that they wrote Torahs. There's a mitzvah for every Jew to write a Torah. And you know what the bigger question is? What's the bigger question?
I have a question.
Just hang on. What's the bigger question? A question for us. Where does that answer that question? Okay. Well, the bigger question is we haven't said it, but the elephant in the room is: have you written a Sefer Torah yet? Maybe you have. You wrote a Sefer Torah your own? Have you written a Sefer Torah on your own? I haven't written a Sefer Torah on my own. Okay, so most of us hadn't. We have a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah on our own. Oh, we wrote letters, so let's talk about that. We'll soon get to that. But we haven't actually. The Torah says write a Sefer Torah. So we're asking, how did the 600,000 Jews do it in one day? Then how did Moshe Rabbeinu write 13 Torahs in one day? And the bigger question is, what about us? The Rabbi hasn't asked this question, but we're going to get to that question. So let's stick to the text though, because it's going to keep us grounded. So in continuation to this suggestion that perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu just wrote the end chapters. Perhaps he'd been writing over 40 years what had been developing. He wrote the end chapters. We could also say that even the last portions that we're reading now, which are the last days of Moshe's life, the same way we have a question about the end of Torah, where Moshe Rabbeinu writes that Moshe passed away. How can Moshe write that Moshe passed away? Who's writing? I don't want to tell you the joke. Maybe I shouldn't tell a joke in the middle of a shir, but the guy who reads the obituaries, you know what the obituaries is? In every newspaper, they say who passed away. So he opens the newspaper and he sees his name is there. So he's alive, so he doesn't know. So he calls his friend. He says, "Hey, Chaim, did you see who's in the obituaries?" Chaim says, "Yeah, Moshe, I saw you there. Where are you calling from?" So Vayamat Shom Moshe, it says Moshe passed away. 1 second. You passed away. How did you write it? So we know that one of the answers is that Moshe Rabbeinu was instructed by Hashem to write the future. Hashem, through Ruach HaKodesh, gave him to write the future that Moshe died. He wrote it before he died. So maybe he could have written these last few chapters even also before he passed away, like before the last day, right? And then all you have to do is finish it off. The last day, he finished off 13 Torahs and gave it to them. That could make sense. And this would be also, we could say about all the other Jews. Because what happened throughout the 40 years of the desert, the Rambam says, the way the Jews learned in the desert is that after they heard the mitzvah and they heard the instruction from Moshe Rabbeinu, they would write it. So they had scrolls and scrolls of different dissertations, different speeches by Moshe Rabbeinu, and they would review it. Only what was part of the written Torah. So which would mean that in the 40 years of the desert, the Jews had already written most of the Torah. So now on the last day when they're instructed to write a Sefer Torah, all they have to do is write the last few chapters. So paragraph 3 says that it's difficult to say this. First of all, we know there's two opinions. There's a very interesting argument about how the Torah was written, how our 5 books of Moses were written. One opinion is that the Torah was given Megillah, one scroll at a time, topic at a time. Whenever Moshe Rabbeinu said the topic, taught it from Hashem, it was written down. And at the end, Moshe Rabbeinu, by the word of God, collaborated, made a collage, put together all the Megillas, all the different things he had taught, and now we have one Sefer Torah. There's another opinion, though, that says Sefer Torah Chatumanitna. The Sefer Torah was given as one sealed thing. After everything was said and done, then it was all written down. So to say that they wrote it down bit by bit in the last day, they only just finished it, that would only go with the first opinion in the Gemara. It's an argument in the Gemara in Gittin. That would only go with that first opinion that says it was given bit by bit. What about the opinion that says it was given as one full book? So there is an opinion, even if you say it was given as one full book, that it doesn't mean it was just written all in one shot, but it was written in the order that we are given it. You see, the Torah doesn't speak. The problem is the Torah doesn't speak in chronological order. Ein mukdam u'mu'achar b'Torah. The Torah goes back and forth in terms of history. It's not it's not a clear timeline. So it's not chronologically in order. So the question is, was it given bit by bit and then rearranged later? Or even if it was given as one book, but that just means to say, according to the Tosfot, that doesn't mean it was written all the way at the end. It just means that it was written in the order that we have it. So even if one part comes later chronologically, part comes earlier, the way it was written was in the way we see it, in the written order of the Torah. But still in all, Rashi doesn't learn like that. Rashi learns in the end, the Torah was given as one big book. So if it's given as one big book, you can't say it was written throughout the 40 years. It was all written at the end, according to Rashi. And in general, to say what the Rambam says, that the Jewish people wrote it down, every single person, hang on one second. How many Jews were born after the beginning, after Sinai? Most of the Jews that went into Israel, most of the Jews that were standing there about to go into Israel were not there at the beginning. They weren't 20 years old. They weren't 13 years old, maybe when the Torah was given. So how could you say they had written then their Torah? They weren't even there. Maybe they were born 20 years in, and now they're 20 years old. So they would have only partial Torahs anyway. So you can't say that the ones who are, everybody now is able to finish the Torah, because not everybody was of age, of adult age, even when the Torah was starting to be given at the beginning of the 40 years. You say maybe they got from their father. Okay, interesting. There were 600,000 men over the age of 20, but many of them died throughout the 40 years. And now you have a whole new generation of people, which maybe weren't even bar mitzvah at Har Sinai, so they couldn't have been writing their own Torahs back then. So that answer doesn't really hold water. And number three, the Rebbe says the answer is not so good to say they wrote it bit by bit, because our sages tell us that Moshe wrote. Our sages don't tell us that Moshe wrote it bit by bit. They say on the last day he wrote 13. Now, if everyone was writing Sefer Torahs their whole life, as they were growing, as they were hearing the information, so our sages should have told us that as well. The fact that we're told about 13 Torahs, right, that now became available on the day of the passing of Moshe, seems like these were the only Torahs. It's not like there were a bunch of hundreds of thousands of Torahs being written throughout the time by the Jewish people. No, it seems like there was, when Moshe passed away, he left his legacy of 13 Torahs, and that's all the Torahs there were.
Why would anybody say the Levites are going to get one, but we're not if they were all?
Moshe said.
No, but they were
You're
complaining.
saying,
Why
yes,
is
so that version, that story of that complaint wouldn't make sense if there were hundreds of thousands of Torahs. Good point. So from the story that our sages tell us in the Gemara, it's clear that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Torahs that day. So we have three questions. How did he do 13 Torahs in one day? Number two, what happened? Why didn't all the other people write Sefer Torahs? Each and every one is obligated. We don't find they wrote Sefer Torahs. How did they fulfill their obligation? And now paragraph 4. First, we have to understand the famous question, and this is the question I already raised, but the famous question. If there's a mitzvah, a positive commandment for every single Jewish person to write a Sefer Torah for himself, why don't we find that Jewish people in general, and even great Jewish scholars, but great Jewish leaders, in other words, we can't maybe ask on the masses, but let's ask on the select people from the great Jewish leaders. We don't find that they ever did this in actuality. And certainly we don't find that they did it right by their bar mitzvah. You may find that many rabbis have participated or maybe even wrote a Sefer Torah, commissioned their own Sefer Torah, but not when they're 13. Later on, somebody saves money all his life, and then it gets to okay, you can write a Sefer Torah. So it could be. So how, in other words, and here's a very, very interesting thing. You see, there's an aspect of learning Torah that is part of a Messiah, part of a tradition. And the tradition is that we're coming from people that were even greater than us. We don't see ourselves, although we're in the age of social media and the age of sophistication, we may be more advanced in certain things, but we don't see ourselves more advanced in our knowledge of Torah and in our ruchaniyut, in our spiritual stature, spiritual level. So now if we have in our character, so if we have a question now, you see, there's two ways of dealing with this question. Let's say you're discovering Torah now for the first time. You see there's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. And you look around, you ask your friend, hey, one second, you were born into this. You've always been doing mitzvahs. You grew up with this. Did you ever write a Torah? And he'll tell you no. So there's two ways of dealing with it. Either you could say, oh, you're a sinner. Something's wrong. You come into shul, says, guys, I just discovered the Torah says you have to write a Torah. You guys are all sinners. I don't want to listen to what you have to say. You don't listen to what it says. Or you have to stop a second and say, one second. There's a community here and it's previous generations. One second. Let's say that all the people here really are not such good. They just been callous and haven't fulfilled. Well, let's look into the great leaders. 1 second, they also didn't do it. So obviously we don't say, no, they all made a mistake. No, we have to say there must be something here. Let's understand, how is it that they were God-fearing, they did all the mitzvahs, and yet this mitzvah they didn't seem to do. There must be something here. That's the humble way. That's the traditional way of looking at our previous generations, at our leaders, trying to understand what's going on. Not, they all made mistakes.
In the mitzvah, you are the one that demand each one
Yeah,
right.
So let's analyze. So let's analyze what's the mitzvah. Okay.
I don't understand, why is the third option not, hey, I'm gonna be the change I want to see? They stop writing them, I'm gonna be
I'm going to be the
first one.
changer, because that assumes you can always add, but there's a humility and an understanding that there must be something deeper than what you're seeing. It's not as simple. Nobody noticed it. There is a concept. Our sages tell us sometimes from heaven something is overlooked so that the next generation can come and make a change. That's true, but it would have to be something so central as one of the 613 mitzvahs, and generations after generations, and we don't find that it's done on the day of the bar mitzvah. People start writing we teach a kid from when he's 12 to know how to start writing a Torah. And the day of his mitzvah, he starts writing a Torah. So there must be something here that needs to, also don't forget, we need to, even if you want to make the change today and say, okay, everybody will write a Torah, but we have to kind of find the zchut, we have to find a way to justify in a good light the previous generations. So let's look at it like this. Okay, we're going to have now an interesting journey, which is going to get us to quite a startling destination. So we could say the reason is, we know that the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, was one of the Rishonim, 800, 900 years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago. And so is the Halach and Shulchan Aruch. We're in the middle of paragraph 4. Middle of that, second paragraph, Dalet. Dalet, second paragraph. We could say maybe the thing is that the Halach is that to these days, where the Sefer Torah is in the shul and it's used only to be read in the community, it's not used for personal learning. So now the mitzvah becomes to write books, the 5 books of Moses, the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Talmud, their interpretations, that a person should be able to study them. Those are the books we're instructed to write. What's the purpose of writing a Torah? Kitvu lachem et hashira azot, write the Torah. V'lamda et b'nei Yisrael sima b'fiyim, teach it to the Jewish people, put it into their mouths. If the Torah is in the art, what does it help? So the Rosh said, and as we'll see later, the Rabbi says, actually we stay away from learning from a Torah, even though it says maybe we should learn directly from the scroll on Friday or something. Well, because of the honor of the Torah, we don't want to disrespect the Torah, we don't want to mistreat it. We keep it there and we use a book. So today the mitzvah is to write books, to buy books. And some, 1 second, so at bar mitzvah, do many people get books? Yeah, many kids get bar mitzvah money, they buy books. So the standard in a traditional Jewish home is a boy gets, actually people give him gifts books, he buys for him holy books, right? So even though the Ramah says, now the only thing is that Ramah says, the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Isserlich says that if somebody bought a Sefer Torah and he didn't do anything to it, he just bought it without adding anything, without having it written especially, he just bought a finished product, he didn't fulfill his obligation because it says you have to write the Torah. So one would think that maybe, what about by books? By books is different though. By the Sefer Torah, which is handwritten, we can say if somebody just buys it, finished product, and doesn't even add anything. By the way, these days when somebody buys a Sefer Torah, they'll always leave the last few letters unwritten so that he can come and fill in the last letters. Till the last letters are written, it's an invalid book, invalid Torah scroll. So once you fill in the last letters, it's as if you've written the whole book, the whole Torah scroll. So that's the way to fulfill it. If you just buy a ready Sefer Torah, he says it's like grabbing a mitzvah from the market. You haven't actually fulfilled the mitzvah. But that's only in the handwritten Sefer Torah. But in books, who writes the books? The laser printer, the offset. No, not who writes the thing. Who actually prints it? Who puts it on paper? Even if you're printing it or reading it on paper. And actually, good question. AI today. Who said even it's being written? I'm not sure. Can you fulfill the mitzvah of getting books to teach the Bnei Yisrael in digital print? I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. So chapter 5. So in other words, buying books does have that same, according to the Rosh, buying books is today a fulfillment of what the instruction of the mitzvah of writing a Torah in order that you should study Torah. Today that's fulfilled by writing books, by buying books. However, paragraph 5, we can't really say that that's a good enough answer because we don't find in any place that we should have an instruction. Okay, so that means that we should tell every bar mitzvah boy to go and buy books, right? And actually, we should tell, if it's in order to get a person to know what he's supposed to do and to know that if he's going on the wrong path, he's violated Hashem's covenant, we should make sure he has halacha books, not just books that speak about the theoreticals of Torah, books like the Rambam, the book of the 14 books of Rambam, which give us all the laws of the Torah, or the Shulchan Aruch, which gives us the practical laws that we have to live in our lives. But we don't find that we tell a bar mitzvah boy, okay, you become bar mitzvah, now go and fulfill, take money and go and fulfill the mitzvah, like writing a Sefer Torah, but the equivalent, which is buy books so you can have the Torah so you can learn the Torah from them. People do it, but it's not that we find that there's an instruction. Why not? If that's the way to fulfill the mitzvah, there should be an instruction. And actually, some opinions, even after what the Rosh says, way back, again, I'm not sure if it's 1,000 years ago, a little bit less maybe. But after what the Rosh says, there are still people that say after him, look, what the Rosh said is that today we fulfill this obligation by buying books. That's true, but still there's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. But there's another mitzvah to buy books, because that's the way we study today. But the mitzvah to actually write a Torah scroll is still there. So 1 second. So how are we doing it? If many are of the opinion that there's still a mitzvah to write but the best way to fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah is instructed in the actual 5 books of Moses, is to physically write a Torah scroll, how are we and how are the great Jewish leaders ever fulfilling that? We don't find that there's an emphasis that they ever said from Bar Mitzvah on to actually fulfill this mitzvah. More than that, we find that the great Jewish leaders that did it didn't do it when they became Bar Mitzvah. They did it maybe when they had enough money to do it, or maybe after many years. We don't find that they endeavored to do it as early as possible.
Maybe the talent to do it. It's not something easy to write in the software style. No?
Yeah.
Anybody ever seen the possibility that it's a personal message to write a story in real life?
That's not the literal mitzvah. It's a nice thought, and it could make sense also as a good behavior. But
while you write it by hand, you could have insights on it.
Also, 100%,
like
yeah,
the act of doing that. So
100%. The act of writing is a mitzvah. Yeah. 100%.
yeah.
So we have to say, we're following this journey, this we call this pilpul, this Talmudic journey of give, take, ask. This is the way of pilpul. This is what's called pilpul. So we have to say that even before these great people, even before you actually write a Sefer Torah, there must be in some way some fulfillment that they've done to fulfill this mitzvah, which is one of the 613 mitzvahs. And when they later wrote an actual Sefer Torah, that was even better way. It was an embellishment. It was a better fulfillment. But it must be that the basis of this mitzvah of writing Sefer Torah is somehow fulfilled in a more basic way by all the leaders. And if it's all by the leaders, we'll discover we're also fulfilling it in some way. Now listen to this Talmudic logic here. Paragraph 6. We could say the explanation is like this. We know that it's customary by all Jews that in every community there's a communal Sefer Torah. It belongs to the community. We know that even you can force, a very fascinating thing, that we live in a small community here in Bangkok, right? There's a mitzvah that sometimes the community can force each other to participate in a particular thing. For example, we're about to go on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. There's a mitzvah, if there's no minyan for Yom Kippur, let's say one guy says he's the 10th man. There's only, in a village, there's only 10 Jewish men. And he says, I want to go spend Yom Kippur with some other place. You can't go. You can force him to stay. You're the 10th. Right? You can't ruin it for everybody. Similarly, there are some communal responsibilities. We can force people like a tax. If there's no Torah, we can force people, they have to participate. I don't want to participate. No, we can. The forcing is if you have a communal enforcement, In other words, it's not so much about forcing, it's about that you have an obligation, the community has an obligation, which then goes to all its members that they should have a communal Sefer Torah. So one second, everybody's responsible for each other. So besides the fact that we know that individuals sometimes write a Sefer Torah for themselves, and then they give it to the shul to be used, and sometimes they give it over to belong to the community, sometimes they keep it as their own personal asset, which is being loaned to the community. Right? But besides that, there's a custom that the community tries to have their own Sefer Torah, and those Sefer Torah which are written, we have at least one here, we have two here, that were written from the very beginning by people given a chance to participate communally in the Sefer Torah. So now it becomes a Sefer Torah of the community. One second. So now every Jew is a participant in the Sefer Torah that's been written. How does this work? When we have something that belongs to the community, who does it belong to? Who does it belong to? There's a discussion in Talmudic thought. Who does it belong to? So there's one opinion says that every individual owns a little part of it because the question is, how do we look at a community? Is it an accumulation of individuals, or do we, and this is the way we do look at it, it's a new entity, which is higher than individuals. So can we really say that if the community owns the Torah, every individual owns a little bit of it? Or is it that everybody kind of merges into a new reality called community, and the community owns the Sefer Torah? More than that, even if we're going to say that it's as if we have, let's say, the Chveis says 5,000 Jews in Thailand. So let's say it's a community Torah, 5,000 Jews all own, they're partners in the Torah. The question is, can you fulfill the obligation of writing your own Torah by being part of a Torah in which you have hundreds of people or tens of people or however many people be part of? So just one second. So the question comes back, how can you fulfill the obligation? We're asking a technical question. Hashem gives us one of the 630 mitzvahs to write yourself a Sefer Torah. Kitvu lachem, write for yourself a Sefer Torah. We're trying to answer now that the communal Sefer Torah can somehow fulfill that obligation, but how could that be? There's many other people as part of it. You have to write your own Torah.
Yeah, maybe Kitvu lachem, it sounds more like Kitvu as a community, not as a person.
You're asking interesting, but we read the word lachem as being you individually. I'm gonna file it in your mind and come back because I also tape this, so I want to I tape it, and then some of many people that learn the actual text with me later on. So no, I'm happy to discuss it afterwards. So paragraph 7, the explanation is, and listen to this Talmudic halachic concept. Let's talk about an esrog. Today we're lucky that we have the ability to mostly have our own lulav and etrog. If you didn't order one yet, tell Yossi, maybe you had to already ordered it. But it's not difficult to get a lulav and etrog. The olden days, a lulav and etrog, the citron and the palm, the 4 species for sukkahs. Today, it's not so difficult. It used to be very difficult, especially Eastern Europe. There could be some places where do you find an etrog? Very, very difficult. So you used to have a communal, at least you made sure to have a communal set. But one second, the halacha is, what's the law? The law is that you need to lakachtem lachem by Yom HaRishon. Really, the Torah says you need to take for yourself on the first day of Sukkot the 4 species. You need to own it yourself. So how can you work if the community buys one together? But the way it works is halacha. Again, the halacha looks at it, ready from in the Shulchan Aruch hundreds of years ago. Halacha says we look at it as if everybody, when they make the blessing on it, the community has bequeathed it to them. And when they give it back, and another person makes a blessing, it's given back to the community now gives it to that individual. Yeah. This is not something you have to do consciously. This is something that happens automatically. This is the purpose for what it's been bought. It belongs to everyone when they're using it. So maybe we could say the same thing here. Since it's not possible always for everybody to have their own Sefer Torah, not everybody has the money, it's not possible. So therefore, when the community has a Sefer Torah, we assume that what the community is thinking. this body called community, whether or not they're consciously thinking, it doesn't matter. But this body called community is saying that this Sefer Torah is going to belong to every single person for the purpose of having the mitzvah of writing their own Sefer Torah. Not just that, it's not a communal Sefer Torah which everybody owns in partnership. For the mitzvah of reading the Torah, every person owns it individually. Well, how does that work? With an esrog, paragraph 8, there's a distinction between this and etrog. Why? In the 4 species, the etrog, you only need it for a few minutes, right? You make a bracha, and you give it back. By a Sefer Torah, what's the mitzvah of a Sefer Torah? You have to write the Sefer Torah, and therefore, even if you inherited a Sefer Torah, you should write one by yourself. And the Ramah says that even if you bought a Sefer Torah and you didn't fix it or something, you didn't fulfill your obligation. So what does it help that everybody participated in writing the Torah or in paying for the Torah? It's not better than writing your own Torah. So the answer is that here we're talking about a communal Sefer Torah, which belongs not to partners, but belongs to an individual, to the community. So we have the rule. There's a fascinating rule about the concept of Beit Din. Beit Din, when we go to a court, it's called the Beit Din, the house of judgment. But then there's a concept that there is a conceptual Beit Din. There is the representative conceptually of the Jewish community that if the Torah feels this particular thing, then we say Leiv Beit Din Matnalem, so to speak, the heart of the Beit Din stipulates onto the community that this Sefer Torah will belong to everybody when they need it. What does that mean? So we could say that the stipulation that the heart of the community, the heart of the Beit Din, the heart of the court makes in our instance is not that the Sefer Torah should be his, but actually the writing of the Sefer Torah is as if it was written on behalf of every single person in the community. In other words, if the mitzvah is to write the Torah, it's not enough to own a Torah without writing it. But when the person was writing the Torah, it was written for him. Now, where does a person have a personal connection to the Torah? When's the first time you had a personal connection to Torah? Bar mitzvah. What do we do when we have a bar mitzvah? We get called to the Torah, we grab the Torah, we hold it with our hands. At that moment, when you hold the Torah with your hands, first time or any time, what we say is that there is a conceptual grant being granted to you by the Leiv Beit Din, by the communal heart, the heart of the Beit Din, who's so to speak represents the communal thinking. This bar mitzvah boy, it's now his. It's as if it was written for him. He fulfills the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah by being called up to the Torah. And each and everybody of us, when we go up to the Torah, has that right that we grab onto the Torah. And so to speak, there's an unwritten or an automatic kind of subconscious, you could say the supra-Jewish consciousness, which we call Leiv Beit Din, the heart of the Beit Din, of the court, kind of bestows upon you. The Torah is yours. You are now fulfilling. It's as if 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, whenever the Torah was written, as if it was written for you. But 1 second. If you're 13 years old and the Torah, or you're 20 years old, the Torah was written 30 years ago, how could it have been written for you? You weren't even an adult yet. Maybe you weren't born yet. So we'll deal with that in a second. So according to today, we could say even more. Now, this concept, you're going to ask, well, the Sofer wasn't thinking about everybody. It wasn't thinking about you when you're saying that when I hold the Torah now, I go back to the scribe, and it's as if the scribe wrote it for me. As if I commissioned the scribe. How could that work? So it's interesting. We have this concept in halacha. There is a very basic law about sacrifices. Sacrifice has to be brought l'shem shishat varim hazevach nizbach. A sacrifice needs to have that the Kohen who's bringing it up, and needs to think about 6 things. Who is bringing it up for? What kind of korban is bringing up for? The reality is, if he didn't think about anything, but he didn't think anything contra, we say it's okay. Why? There's a kind of again, the Leiv Beit Din. We say that the Beit Din's consciousness is working through him. If he had other intention, negative intention, that's a problem. But if he didn't, we say the consciousness is so to speak, he's representative of a higher consciousness flows through him and is there. This leiv beitin, it's a real concept in halacha that it's as if, even if you didn't think about it, but it's as if it was thought about for you, so to speak, the guardian of Israel, the trustees of the Jewish people, which is the based in it. The concept of based in has thought about it, and now this retroactively, the Sofer has written the Torah for the one who's getting the Aliyah right now, hanging on to the Torah, getting the Aliyah. Paragraph 9, if that's the case, we could say even more than this. Even those that were born afterwards, right? Because it was written, let's say, 20 years ago, and the kid's getting an Aliyah now. But there's a mitzvah that you have to look over the Torah and fix it from time to time. Remember, like a couple of years ago, we had a big rain here, and it rained in on top of the Aron Kodesh, and we had to send the two Sifrei Torahs, we had to send them to be fixed. When you fix a Torah, it's as if you wrote it new. We didn't lose any Torahs, we just had to fix it. And then we undertook to write a new Torah, which, by the way, is finished. We'll have to bring it one of these days. But when you have a Torah that's being edited and fixed, it's as if you wrote a new Torah. So now anybody that's getting this Torah, it's as if anybody that was bar mitzvah up to 3 years ago, when he gets a Torah, it's as if he wrote the Torah, because the based in consciousness bequeaths it to him when he picks it up. It was written, in this case, I think 3 years ago, right after, because being fixed is just the same as being written. So we can say that we actually, we have a lot of Torahs that were written at various stages, and once they're being fixed, it's a mitzvah to always look over the Torah and fix it, even if it's a small fixing, not a major thing. Sometimes a letter runs into each other, you have to scratch off, so it doesn't, two letters don't connect. Sometimes you have to fill in a little more thing. So anybody who became bar mitzvah, between his bar mitzvah, the Torah was fixed, and afterwards he had his bar mitzvah, right? So he now has the mitzvah of writing a Torah. When he gets his aliyah, we go back and say that the fixing of the Torah, which is the writing of the Torah, was also done on his behalf. According to this, we'll understand that what about a community that only buys a Torah, didn't write their own Torah? Because they have to fix it from time to time. So we say that fixing is like the mitzvah on behalf of the entire community, the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah.
But it says that they have to write their own Torah, right? That's what it says.
Right. So,
but we're rationalizing that, I understand. But what if at that moment that he was called to the Torah, he picks it up and walks out of the shul and brings it home?
so there's
Would he be stealing it because it's his Torah?
Yes, he would, because there's a stipulation that it's probably there's another stipulation of it's a matana al manat lahachzir. The same thing you could ask with the lulav and etrog, if the guy decides to walk away with it.
Yeah.
There's a concept in halacha, a fascinating concept, which is you can give a gift on the stipulation that he gives it back. And for the duration of the gift, it's his, but he has an outside obligation to give it back. So
So I knew they already thought about this.
Almanat lachzir. Matana almanat lachzir. Stipulation. Almanat. A condition. Tonight. Paragraph 10. We need still to understand, though. It would seem to be that there's another difference between the esrog, the communal etrog. By the way, by the Rebbe bringing from the communal etrog, is the communal etrog was so commonplace in Eastern Europe in all the communities that it's an ironclad argument. It's not that some people did it, some people didn't. At some stage, many communities had to rely on this concept that they didn't have enough. I mean, over here we had 1 year that all we had was 2 kosher aravis. First year was everybody had to make a bracha on the same lulav and etzik in order for it to be theirs. We give it to them. So this is a concept that everybody. This concept of the communal four species, it's ironclad. It was just never applied. That ever comes and applies it to Torah, which takes away the burning question: how can it be that so many people didn't write a Sefer Torah? But now we're going to also have another angle, which will also tell us that lately, Baruch Hashem, we do all have a certain aspect of actually writing a Torah. So 9. According to this, we can say more than this. Even though, paragraph 10. We have to understand there seems to be a somewhat fundamental difference between the communal esrog and the communal Sefer Torah. Why? We know that the later day commentaries, the Achreinim, they want to differentiate between a partnership in a Sefer Torah and a partnership in an esrog, because we say when it comes to a partnership in an esrog, that Amos says that if it was bought if the community bought it for the purpose of fulfilling the obligation, you don't even have to say, when each one comes to the bima and takes it and makes a bracha, you don't have to say it's yours. That's what it was bought for. That happens automatically. But by an esrog, let's think about this. By an esrog, it's a one-time mitzvah. You can say it's yours, give it back, right? It only has to be yours when you make a Sefer Torah, but the Sefer Torah, how long does it have to be yours? What's the purpose of a Sefer Torah? The purpose of a Sefer Torah is not just to write it. It's to learn from it. So the moment you give it back, you don't have a Sefer Torah to learn from. But actually, it's not like that. You know why? There's a big distinction between our times and earlier times. I told you that it's a fascinating thing that when I was a kid, I read this halacha and I couldn't understand actually why we don't do it. It says that it's a custom. The Arizal had a custom on Friday afternoon. He would review the parsha in a Sefer Torah. We should technically take out a Sefer Torah and open it up and review the parsha. So the Rebbe says, but we see that there's commentaries that we don't do it because of the honor of the Sefer Torah. And the Rebbe says that usually there's a concept, if you don't see something being done, it's not a proof. Somebody says, I've never seen this being done. That's not a proof. Maybe you just didn't see it. Maybe they're doing it, you don't see it. But if it's something that should be done every Friday and you've never seen it any Friday, that means it's not done. So today it's not done. We don't use the Torah. We don't actually learn from the Torah. So today, clearly, the Torah is not to learn from. The Torah is a mitzvah to write, but the mitzvah of learning from the Torah is in books. Like we said, the Rosh says, these days we learn Torah from books. That's a mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of learning Torah. So what's the main function of the Sefer Torah? Is to read in public from it. So even according to the opinion, what we said, the Rosh is of the opinion that the whole mitzvah today of writing a Torah is fulfilled by buying books. But even though we say no, there are some that say it's still a mitzvah to actually write a Torah, but it's enough to have the Torah available to you at certain times, because the actual study is anyway not going to be from the Torah. So there's kind of a two-tiered connection to the mitzvah of writing Sefer Torah. There's the actual writing and there's the study. These days it doesn't go together. The study comes from books. You have a mitzvah to buy books. There's a mitzvah to buy Torah books. You have a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. You need that only at least to fulfill that mitzvah at some stage. When you get an aliyah, you're retroactively the community. When you get an aliyah in a community Sefer Torah, you're kind of being bequeathed that mitzvah. And we all try to get aliyah once a year. Maybe this could be, I think, the Rebbe in the verbal fabreng, and this is the written part. I don't see it being said here necessarily, but maybe this is actually every bar mitzvah boy gets an aliyah right as soon as his bar mitzvah happens. So he's actually, you asked, why don't we find the fulfillment of the mitzvah of writing a Torah? If we look at it this way, right at the bar mitzvah, we have the communal consciousness is giving him the mitzvah, fulfilling the mitzvah of writing the Torah by the fact that he's getting an aliyah and hanging on to the Torah and becomes his for that moment till he finishes aliyah. And now he's done the mitzvah and he gets books. He has a way to learn as well. Paragraph 11. Another detail in this, a Sefer Torah that belongs to community is different than a Sefer Torah of partners. We said that some say the Sefer Torah of partners, you don't really fulfill the mitzvah. There's a difference between a partnership and a Sefer Torah. If I say, come, let's write a Sefer Torah together, let's split the money, or a communal Sefer Torah. What's the difference? In a partnership Sefer Torah, you have to ask the partners what they have in mind. Now, since you need time to learn, it's not like an esrog, you need 2 minutes to make a bracha and wave it. The Torah, you need actual time to take the Torah scroll and to study. So if you have partners, you can't fulfill the obligation at the same time. If I've taken it to my house to read in my house, the Torah, you can't take it to your house at that time. So if we're both partners in the Torah, it's a problem. We don't have at all times a Torah available to study from, because it depends on the partnership and the way we divide up the time of the Torah. However, when we're talking about a communal Torah, what is it used for? It's used to read publicly. You don't need any stipulation. It's a communal agreement that the Beis Din, so to speak, does on behalf of the community, that when everybody goes to the Torah, it becomes theirs in order to fulfill the mitzvah of writing the Sefer Torah. So it's much stronger. In other words, using a community Sefer Torah is even stronger it's different than being a partner with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people in this Torah, where everyone's opinion carries weight. A communal Torah, there's no individual that their opinion carries weight. It's the collective, the Leiv Beis Din, we call it, the collective super consciousness so to speak, of the community, the godly conscience of the community, which says that it belongs to all of you, and each of you, when he goes up to it, it's yours, and it's being used to read publicly, so you're all hearing the Torah together. At the same time, you're all everybody owns it individually when they need it. So according to this, we could say, I'm going to come back in a second to something fascinating that Rabbi points out, but let's paragraph 12. According to all this, we can say, let's go back to the original question. How did the Jews write the first Sefer Torah on the first day? How did they fulfill the mitzvah that first day? We can say, very simple. It was impossible then that everybody should write their own Sefer Torah. Physically impossible. And by the way, how Moshe wrote 13, we also don't know. The Rebbe says, still we need to understand how he wrote 13. But even if we answer for him,
Moshe did a lot of stuff we can't explain.
good point. Even if we can answer for Moshe, but how are we going to answer for the whole Jewish people? That doesn't work. So, but the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote communal Torahs, right? He wrote 13 Torahs, a Torah for each tribe. So each of those 13 Torahs becomes a communal Torah. Communal Torah, we said there's the Leiv based in, the consciousness of the community, the based in is stipulating that when anybody learns from that Torah, it's as if Moshe wrote it for him. So they all fulfilled the personal obligation of writing a Sefer Torah. And we could say that this actually is the reason why the writing of the instruction about writing a Sefer Torah was said in a way that they couldn't fulfill it. If Hashem wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to actually get the Jews to do it, he should have told it to them about a year before he passed away. He said, guys, get ready. We're going to pass away. It's going to take you a year. Take out your notebooks, take out your parchment, sharpen your feathers, dip it in the ink, and let's start writing Torahs. But he gave it to them on the last day where it's impossible for them to write it. Possibly, says the Rebbe, that Hashem was basically inferring that the way for them to do this on a communal level will be that they'll all be partners in a communal Sefer. Each tribe would be a partner in the communal Torah that was given to them. The fascinating thing. Maybe it comes to teach us in future generations that when there's a time when not everybody can write their own Sefer Torahs, so the mitzvah is to participate in a communal Torah. So now we'll understand that, okay, we've said that even if you didn't actually go and buy a letter, somebody said before we can buy a letter, right? You're automatically, when you get an aliyah, you're retroactively, the Beis Din is saying that you're part of it. It was written for you. This will, paragraph 13, this will tell us that the great mitzvah of actually participating in writing a Sefer Torah, a communal Sefer Torah. When you actually pay and commission a sofer to write at least one, you're buying one letter, so to speak, in the Torah, so you're fulfilling the obligation not just with a consciousness of the Beis Din that's stipulating that it's going to belong to you, which helps even without buying, right? Even if you didn't buy any letter. But now you actually have an action that you can fulfill with your money to participate in writing a Torah. And then for sure, this is not the mitzvah of this is not like grabbing a mitzvah from the market. Actually, when we have the sofa, hopefully we'll do one here. As I say, we have a Sefer Torah that's basically almost finished. We have to bring it in and finish it. You hang on to the sofa's hand and you can actually write it together with him, a letter in the Torah. It was written in Israel, but we just have to finish it here. We started the first letters here a few years ago, and then it was written in Tzfas, and we'll bring it back here to finish. So through the fact that all Jews will have a letter in the Sefer Torah, the mitzvah of the Sefer Torah is the grand finale of all the 613 mitzvahs, so we'll be able to be married to the coming of Mashiach, and Mashiach will have to write his own Sefer Torah because a king needs another Sefer Torah besides for the Sefer Torah he has, like every Jew has. He has to have his own Sefer Torah. So first of all, the Rebbe started a campaign in the 1980s that for children's Sefer Torah, every child should have a letter in a special Sefer Torah that's written for children. And then he said every person should try and buy a letter in a general communal Sefer Torah. So you can go online, you'll find Sefer Torah, I don't know where it is, on Chabad.org, you have Sefer Torah, the general Sefer Torahs, the communal Sefer Torahs, I think they're up to the 7th, 8th, or 9th, whatever it is, that you give a donation of any size, doesn't matter, it could be $1, whatever it is, and the sofer has you give your name. The sofer, when he writes it, has in mind that you're writing a letter, you're purchasing a letter in the Sefer Torah.
You know that even they can ask for the word.
You can even ask for which word, maybe. So it's interesting. What's interesting is that Rebbe points out here in a footnote that it would, perhaps we can say, I mean, let's think about it. When you say that we're all partners in one communal Sefer Torah, is that better or worse than having your own Sefer Torah? You would say Better to have your own, right? But let's think about how is the Torah actually, how is the Torah studied best? On your own or with others? The book Haverim, it's done better with others. More than that, how was the Torah in its first place? How was the Torah given? The Torah was given at Sinai. It says, Torah tziv alanu Moshe morasha kilat Yaakov. The Torah is given to Moshe, morasa, but it's, you can read it, morasa. It's like every Jew is betrothed, is married to the Torah. Which is why a non-Jew is not allowed to learn Torah because the Torah is betrothed to the Jew. It would be a violation of that betrothal. But the Jew, every Jew is personally, so to speak, married to the Torah. Oh, but that means that another Jew can't learn my Torah because it's my personal marriage. But at the same time, it's also Morashaki Ilat Yaakov. It's given as an inheritance to the community. So we see that there's a personal connection, there's a communal connection, and in the giving of the Torah, they actually go together. So the Rebbe is hinting here or saying that there's a concept of perhaps actually being part of a communal Torah is actually in a way even higher in a certain sense. Don't look at it as being a downgrade. Maybe there's even a certain level of upgrade because that's A, Torah is best studied in a communal setting, and B, the way the Torah was given, it was given to every individual and to the community, which would be what would be happening if you're part of a communist every day. You have your letter, but it's part of the greater collective letters. So this is the again, we didn't answer about Shabbos, and we didn't answer exactly how he wrote in 13 days, but as we said, Moshe Rabbeinu did a lot of things. This sikha was not about to answer, it was about to add. The sikha was to answer how we have a fulfillment of our mitzvah and how the great leaders, we don't find that they did the mitzvah. And yet, obviously, we all must be fulfilling the mitzvah. It can't just be that we ignore that, or not us, but the great leaders ignored the mitzvah and so on. Okay.